Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cut to the Chase Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chase Shantz. Alongside me, I have a special guest. He does a lot of radio stuff in the National Football League. He's also the public address announcer for the Miami Marlins. He's got a lot of jobs. Josh Appel. Josh, thanks for stopping on, man.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me. This is appearance number 2 on the podcast. Honored to be back.
Yes, sir, man. It's been a minute, though, but I'm glad that you are back on, man. Ready to talk some football and everything.
Yes, glad to be here.
Yes,
Let's
sir.
do it.
Yes, sir. How's everything been, though? How's life been since 2021? It's been a minute since, we've talked and everything, but how's everything going for you?
Life's good. Got married. We're moving into a house soon, finishing up season 7 with Sports USA and then starting season 4 with the Marlins. Hard to complain, man. Life's good. Hope the same with you.
Awesome. That's awesome, man. Awesome to hear. But yeah, I'm, bouncing around schools, transferred to the University of Cincinnati. So, starting a new chapter there. But man, I mean, life's going good. I'm glad to hear it, man. And then we'll talk about your Sports USA radio game in just a second. You're going to, go to Green Bay, like you said before, freeze your ass off at the game. But Bucs-Packers, we'll save that for a second. But the Saturday slate, all right? So you have the Vikings taking on the Bengals. I'm actually going to be at that game. I'll be freezing myself at that one. Then you got the 4:30 game between the Steelers and the Colts, and then you have the nightcap, the Broncos and the Lions. Out of those 3 matchups, which one, really grabs your attention off the board?
So I think Broncos-Lions is very intriguing. I would go that one and then the early game as well, because I think it's been really impressive how well Jake Browning's played the last 2 games. I don't think really anybody expected that, but he's kind of catapulted the Bengals back into serious playoff contention in the AFC. But as far as the night game goes, since Denver lost that 70-20 game to Miami, they've been a completely different team. Their defense has gotten a lot better. Russell Wilson is playing much better football than he was last season. And the Lions need this one. They did not look very good against Chicago on Sunday. That's the game that I did this past weekend. They obviously lost on Thanksgiving against the Packers. They have been shaky as of late, and it's because their defense hasn't been very good. The first 5-6 weeks of the season, they were allowing under 19 points per game. Now they're towards the bottom of the league in points per game allowed and yards per game allowed. They made some changes in their secondary. They're hoping that Aiden Hutchinson can figure it out and be able to get to the quarterback again. He's only got 1 sack in his last 8 games. Wow. It's been a struggle defensively for Dan Campbell's group. They're trying to find answers. Like I said, they're making changes in the secondary. And then can Jared Goff rebound from a really poor performance against Chicago? That's one of the best offenses in the league. Only the Lions and the Dolphins are ranked in the top 5 in both rush offense and pass offense. And Goff's had some turnover issues. Thankfully for him, they don't play outside anymore. The rest of their games are indoors. And I'm just curious to see how they bounce back against the Denver team that's playing pretty good football right now.
Yeah, it's really, I know Detroit is 9-4 at the moment, but it really is 2 teams that have started to go different directions, to say the least, with the Broncos starting 1-5. And now, they've been on this incline, winning 6 of the last 7 games. Here they are right now. And Detroit, like you mentioned, the secondary, it's been, you have your pass rush and your secondary. Those 2 things go hand in hand together. If those guys aren't getting after the quarterback up front, it's going to put more pressure on the secondary to hold guys longer, hold receivers, because the Broncos have some really good receivers. And one guy that's been playing, out of his mind recently has been Courtland Sutton. He has been absolutely balling. I have him on my fantasy team. I just can't start him because I got a couple of guys like Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, and Jordan Addison. Nonetheless, but Courtland Sutton has been balling. He's been doing his thing. And Sean Payton has found a method to the madness and getting this run game going with Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. So they've done a lot of good things. And mentioning with Detroit needing this game, if Minnesota, they make the quarterback switch with Nick Mullins. So now you have Nick Mullins versus Jake Browning at 1:00 on NFL Network. If if you would have told me this, you're looking at, when the schedule release came out, you're like, Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. This is going to be an awesome one. And this is probably going to be a night game. And then you're like, Nick Mullins, Jake Browning, okay, Jamar and Justin Jefferson are still playing too. All right. But it's crazy how the backup quarterbacks in the National Football League have just taken over. I think there's been over 50 quarterbacks have played this year, I believe.
Yeah, it's a very high number. And what's interesting, I'm down here in South Florida, and the knock on Tua Tagovailoa, one of them coming into the season, was how he has obvious trouble staying healthy. And he's been one of the healthiest quarterbacks in the league this year. And a lot of the guys that you normally would think of as durable, who never get hurt, have gotten hurt and have missed significant time or are out the rest of the season. Minnesota is an interesting one to me because I don't think that team, because of their quarterback situation, has any chance at like anything long term. They might sneak into the playoffs, but I don't see that team being able to make a run. Brian Flores, speaking of Tua Tagovailoa, Brian Flores, Tua's coach the first 2 years, obviously ugly ending with the Dolphins, spends last season in Pittsburgh. Kevin O'Connell brings him in as a defensive coordinator this year, and all of a sudden, Minnesota's defense has made massive improvements this season and winning a game 3-0. It's the first time it's been done since 2007. Not an easy thing to do. Brian Flores' defense has been fantastic this season. Nick Mullins has experience in that offense, of course, from his time in San Francisco. I'm interested to see how that looks. I can't imagine it'll be that big of an improvement from Josh Dobbs. I don't think Josh Dobbs was necessarily the whole problem in Minnesota, but it's amazing how quickly things change in this league. After 2 or 3 games, Josh Dobbs, you're looking at like, wow, like a team like the Jets, how did they miss out on trading for a guy like that who could have saved their season and kept them in contention? And then here we are now, and Josh Dobbs is getting benched for Nick Mullins for the Vikings. So it's funny how quickly things change in this league. We were talking about the Lions earlier. They look like a contender in the NFC. Now you can't trust their defense. The Dolphins, they look like a Super Bowl contender. And now they've got huge injuries, guys dropping like flies left and right. Jerome Baker, Deshaun Elliott, Javon Holland. Now Connor Williams is out. Jalen Phillips is out. Tyreek's got the ankle injury. They're 9-4 after a catastrophic collapse on Monday night. I still think they'll be okay, but the point remains, week to week, things change so much in this league. And Saturday will be the start of, hey, maybe more change. Maybe different expectations coming in now after this weekend for certain teams.
It's very literal when it comes to any given Sunday. Anything can happen any given Sunday that, or Saturday in this lease, that it can just happen. And it's wild. And that middle game, that Steelers-Colts game, I know that our eyes go to the 1:00 game with the flashy receivers and the 8:00 game with the hot Broncos and the sliding Lions in a sense. But that Colts-Steelers game, both teams are 7-6, and they hold playoff spots at the moment. But there are a lot of people that are sitting in that waiting room, waiting for a chance to get into this postseason match. At least through week 15 at the most. One of these teams that loses, going in, sleeping Saturday night, they won't be in the playoff at the moment. Colts, Steelers, Mitch Trubisky, Gardner Minshew. What do you got?
Well, is Minshew going to play? I know he. I don't know if he was diagnosed with a concussion, but it seemed like he got his bell rung pretty good against the Bengals last week. If he plays, I think that's a Colts win. Yeah. I had the Steelers a couple times earlier this year. A lot of smoke and mirrors with that team getting to the point they got to 7-4, and now they've lost 2 consecutive games to teams that they should be beating. Mitch Trubisky has not inspired much confidence, and that defense. Normally, you think Pittsburgh's defense, they're one of the better teams in the league in that regard. This year, they're not. They're in the bottom third of the league in a lot of categories. But what they've done is they've played good red zone defense and they've created a lot of turnovers. Yep. They've got a negative point differential this season. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and that was bound to come crashing down at some point. The Colts, surprisingly, have the most 20-plus point games in the league this year. Gardner Minshew has done such a nice job in place of Anthony Richardson, who looked like he was starting to really click in his rookie season with the Colts. But Shane Steichen's done a phenomenal job with that team, and I would not be surprised if they snuck into the playoffs. They've got, when healthy, as good of a run game as anybody. They've got Zaire Franklin, who's top of the league in tackles at linebacker. Josh Downs did a nice season, Michael Pittman, and they've got some good players on that team. I wonder. I don't think Pittsburgh is going to make the playoffs. I think the Colts have a good shot, but Buffalo's lurking there, and I think Buffalo is going to get one of those wild card spots without a doubt.
It's that time of year, man. The teams that get hot, they have a shot. And funny stat right here. I didn't even realize this until today. The Colts haven't beaten the Pittsburgh Steelers since 2008 when Peyton Manning was their quarterback. I think there was a week 10 game against Ben Roethlisberger, and they won by 4. But it's been 15 years since the Colts have beaten Pittsburgh. They got it. This is the biggest game of them all in that time frame. It's the Colts have to come out, and Shane Steichen, again, he's done, like you said, such a great job. And if this Colts team makes the playoffs in a year where everyone thought it would just be a rebuilding year, coming off the 4-13 season that they had in 2022, I mean, he's got to be up for Coach of the Year in that category with him, DeMeco Ryans, if they make the playoffs, and some of the better coaches up there in those ranks. I mean, he's got to be in that conversation, you would think.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Just because Coach of the Year is always what team outperforms their expectations at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And certainly the Colts have done that. I agree with you on DeMeco Ryans. I don't think anybody thought they'd be in contention like they are. But you have to remember, we don't know C.J. Stroud's condition, and Tank Dell, who was a revelation for them this year. He's out for the year. Yeah. Nico Collins, not sure if he's going to be back this week. And we saw how that offense looked without those two guys against a really good Jets defense. So I'm curious to see how they finish out the season, but I think the future is really bright in Houston. I love DeMeco Ryans as a coach. CJ Stroud's been phenomenal for them. The AFC is a logjam. They've got 2 or 3 really good teams at the top that are competing for that 1 seed. Baltimore looks to be in the driver's seat now. The Dolphins right behind them. Huge matchup in Week 17 in Baltimore between those 2 teams. Yeah. But the Chiefs clearly aren't what they were. The Dolphins have kind of faltered a bit here. That loss to Tennessee is a huge hit to their 1 seed hopes, although it's still possible. I was talking about this with somebody else yesterday. I don't see a team at the top of the AFC that is flawless, like a team like San Francisco when they're healthy. There isn't a San Francisco of the AFC. And so for me, that, makes it a little more wide open in that conference going forward. Yeah,
without a doubt. I mean, it's going to be, a back alley brawl between all those teams, whoever makes the playoffs. The 7 teams that make the playoffs, it's gonna get interesting. And your game is really interesting to say the least, because you're looking at the Bucs, who had a very dramatic win over the Atlanta Falcons on the road last week. Baker Mayfield has had a resurgence this season. He's had a very good season, and a lot of people have counted him out over the years. He's learned almost every type of offensive system in the last year or so, to give him his credit. And then the Packers got really hot. They lose just a heartbreaker against the Giants on Monday night. And Jordan Love, everybody's talked about the identical stats to Aaron Rodgers as a rookie, and even Brett Favre back then at certain points in the season. But I'll ask you this to start. What is your impression of Jordan Love? Like, what are your just general thoughts of him? And is this the first time you've called a Packers game this year, or have you already called?
No, I had them against the Steelers earlier this year, and I think you were starting to see the turn for Jordan Love in that game, despite the fact that he threw 2 interceptions at the end when they had a chance to win. I mean, he drove them down to the red zone twice and threw 2 interceptions. Matt LaFleur is one of the best coaches in the league. I don't care who your quarterback is. This past Sunday was his first loss in December as Packers head coach. Number 1. He's been undefeated in December. Unreal. He's a great coach. He's a great play caller. And, I was not a big believer in Jordan Love. I was not all that impressed last season when I saw him. He obviously didn't get off to a good start at the beginning of this year. But credit to him, credit to LaFleur. Jordan Love has made quite the resurgence. Defensively, they struggle, and that might end up being their downfall. But you mentioned the Bucs, man, 6-7. They're a 3-way tie for first in the NFC South. They won the division last year at 8-9. It feels like we're going to get another 8-9 division winner there, but the Bucs control their own destiny to make the playoffs and win that division. I don't know how you can trust the Falcons. I don't know how you can trust the Saints. I don't know how you can trust the Bucs, but the Bucs are in the best spot right now to take that division. And I think none of those teams ever win pretty. It's never going to look the best, but they've got one of the best wide receiver duos in the league in Godwin and Evans. Got a talented young tight end in Kate Otten. Rashad White has had a very nice back half of the season as a dual threat out of the backfield. He's got the 4th most touches in the league. He's top 5 in scrimmage yards. He got a scrimmage touchdown in each of the last 6 weeks. So he's been really good after a really tough start for him. Injuries on defense, a bit of a concern for the Bucs, but they do just enough. Baker Mayfield had 3 touchdowns last week, couple passing touchdowns, 1 on the ground. It's the first time this year he's had 2 second-half passing touchdowns in a game. And it's the first time we were talking about the Colts earlier. It's the first time since Andrew Luck in his rookie season in 2012 that a quarterback has completed less than 50% of his passes in back-to-back weeks and still won. Wow. They find ways to win. They won a game last week, put up 29 points with Mike Evans only having 1 catch for 8 yards. So I think the Bucs are in a good spot. This weekend will go a long way into winning that division, but going into Lambeau in December, always tough. But Baker's been much better quarterback on the road this season than he has been at home.
Yeah, and just, ask Patrick Mahomes about that a couple weeks ago. It is a tough place to play up there in the frozen tundra. And just Mike Evans, man, 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and he just still flies under the radar. He's just one of the most consistent receivers in the 2010s, now in the 2020s. He's just been awesome, and, that'll be really fun to see, Mike Evans on the field, hopefully have a bounce-back game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But we'll move on to just a couple of these big-time games. We'll stand on these a little briefly. Cowboys-Bills. This game's getting aired on Fox nationally to every single household in the United States. It's America's team versus, the team that wears red, white, and blue. Not the Patriots, but the Bills. Josh Allen, they had a really gutsy performance and a win last week against the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that they just seem to own in the regular season at this point. I think Josh Allen's 3-1 in the regular season against Patrick Mahomes. But it's just, the Cowboys, it seems like they haven't played on the road in like a month, which it's almost pretty true. The Cowboys go into the elements. Buffalo goes back home. Buffalo is with their backs against the wall playing for their lives. Who is a player that, might decide this game? Maybe other than the quarterbacks. I know Dak Prescott and Josh Allen have a, big impact on it, but who's a player in this game that will have a very significant impact?
It's a great question. Dak Prescott's playing some of the best football in the league right now, better than any quarterback. And right now he's the odds-on favorite to an MVP. A guy who might go under the radar and affect this game. I mean, listen, I think Jake Ferguson's a really nice – this is a good tight end matchup. Dalton Kincaid, the rookie tight end for the Bills, has been great. Dawson Knox will be back. Jake Ferguson's been great for Dallas. But you got CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup out there, Brandon Cooks. You talk about Tony Pollard. You go on the road to Buffalo in December, you got to be able to run the football. They got a great offensive line in Dallas. I think Tony Pollard is a guy. I don't know if it's under the radar per se, but I think he's going to have a big game there. And from a Dolphins perspective, because I'm down here, that's a huge game for their division prospects because the Bills have a cakewalk of a schedule to end the season with the Chargers, with the Patriots, and closing out Week 18 against the Dolphins, while Miami has the Jets this weekend, the Cowboys, the Ravens, and the Bills at home Week 18. So this is a huge weekend for both the Dolphins and the Bills. Bills probably need to win this one to give themselves a better shot at winning the division. But I mean, we could be setting up for a winner takes the AFC East in Week 18 if the Bills can win this one at home. The Dolphins are huge Cowboys fans this weekend in Buffalo, that's for sure.
Huge Cowboys fans this weekend. They play them the following weekend on Christmas Eve. What a world it is, man. It's going to be an awesome game to see the Cowboys and the Bills. We'll go down to Florida where you are. Ravens, Jags, Sunday Night Football. Ravens, 10-3, number one seed in the AFC. They just find ways to win. They run the football so well. Lamar Jackson's played pretty well this season. But the Jags, on the other hand, Trevor Lawrence got hurt on Monday Night Football against the Bengals. This past week, he played against the Browns. I have no idea how he played against them, but he scored 27 points, and they ended up losing. And now it's actually – this is an underlying thing. It is tight in the AFC South now. If the Texans and the Colts, if one of those two teams win and the Jaguars lose Sunday night, it's tied in the AFC South for the division lead. And the Jaguars, they're going to be scratching their heads with this one. But, Trevor Lawrence, does he have to have the biggest performance of his life on Sunday night or what?
I don't know about that. So I think their defense needs a bounce back performance more than anything. I mean, they got lit up by Jake Browning and Joe Flacco back-to-back weeks. They were being talked about as a legitimate contender in the AFC, and then they come out and they lose two games that you would think they should win against those two quarterbacks. So I think they need a get-right game. It amazes me that Trevor Lawrence was able to come back from that injury so quickly and play the following week. Guy must be made of steel. But that is a huge, huge game for Jacksonville. They haven't played well against the contenders this season. They have one real quality win, but they've gotten blown out by the Niners. They lost to the Chiefs earlier this season. And this is one of those games for them where they can really prove a lot to a lot of people. The Ravens play these exciting games every week. I mean, what a game against the Rams on Sunday, walk-off, punt return for a touchdown in overtime. If you had the over, you were loving that game. I mean, Lamar is making a good case for MVP as well. But that's a game for the Jags that they really need to have.
Most definitely. This is going to be the first Sunday Night Football game where the Jags have hosted and actually played on since Week 5 of 2008 against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Wow, they've had that's what, twice in 4 weeks, twice in 3 weeks. They've had a primetime game at home for the first time in X amount of years. Monday Night Football.
Over a decade. I mean, it obviously just shows how far they've come in that time frame. So and all the years in between. But to say the least, a huge game for the Jags. The last game on the docket we got to talk about, the Eagles and the Seahawks, the first ever flexed Monday Night Football game. So you have the Eagles. They were 10-1. They were, like Rocky standing on top of the steps. We're the Kings. We're going to go represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. And then they lose to the Niners by a ton. They get absolutely wiped of the field with. They go down to Dallas, and they get wiped of the field with their division rival in the Cowboys. And now they're sitting at a wild card spot right now. To say that, the Eagles have to bounce back in this one, but the Seahawks have just tumbled. It's been a horrible month for them. 6-3 down to 6-7. Drew Lock played last week in place of Geno Smith, who was hurt. Obviously, got to monitor the situation for Geno Smith coming up. But this game, obviously I know it's a very tight race in the NFC right now, but the Seahawks are playing potentially for their lives on Monday Night Football. And they got to have every ounce of the crowd aspect possible. But, what are your thoughts on this game?
You say the Seahawks need a get-right game. The Eagles do as well. That defense has really struggled over the last month or so. I'm good friends with a few Eagles fans. I know fan sentiment is not exactly the best way to judge the team, but not very many people are happy with the offensive play calling right now. I do wonder how Jalen Hurts' knee, I think his knee has been bothering him. I wonder how that's kind of affected things offensively for them, but they need a get-right game. After that Kansas City game where we saw Nick Sirianni gloating going up the tunnel, they've come back down to earth a little bit. And I think it's funny, since Dom, the security guy, was booted off the sideline, they've been blown out. I mean, they were taking the lead when Dom was getting into that scrap with Dre Greenlaw. And he was kicked off the sidelines then. He was kicked off the sidelines the rest of the year. And they haven't been the same since. So maybe it's the on the security guard factor for the Eagles. But, yeah, they need a get-right game. I would imagine the heat will be turned up quite a bit if the Eagles lose to a Drew Lock-led Seattle Seahawks team.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about that, Seattle, I mean, if they take notes from Dallas, don't have Big Don on the sidelines. That's all. I guess that's the trend right there.
That's
but one guy I'm watching out for in this one for a key success for the Seahawks, it's Kenneth Walker. I mean, he's back. He, one of the most dynamic backs in the National Football League, explosive young guy. With the Eagles having just, a lot of problems, especially on their front seven on defense, and they've been giving up the run like crazy. I mean, Kenneth Walker, if he has a breakout game, this one could get really spicy toward the end of this. I mean, it's going to be, it should be a really good Monday Night Football game to watch. But once again, Josh, I appreciate you coming on, stopping by, talking football, man. I, hope you have a great call on Sunday, and, hopefully you come back on here soon.
Yeah, thank you. Would love to do it anytime. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir, man. All right. If you guys have watched this far, just like the video, subscribe.